What's up, guys, and welcome to Q&A, the show where I take your questions from YouTube and answer them here on this show in video format. A ton of questions this week about a wide-ranging number of topics, free agency, draft, all kind of things to get into this week. So I'm just going to start with my guy, Caden Colasar, who says, there's been rumors going around that Richard Sherman wants to come to Cleveland. Do you think it would be a smart signing? I mean, if you can get Richard Sherman on a vet deal, yeah, why not? I know people are going to be up in arms because he had the weird incident with Baker Mayfield a couple of years ago, and like he's Richard Sherman, right? Like he always does something to catch the attention of somebody, whether it's positive or negative. But he's still Richard Sherman. He's playing at a very high level still. He's been a considerably good corner. You can argue that he has an injury history, but, you know, if you can get him on a vet deal, minimum risk there, you know, that's what you want. And I get a lot of people are like, well, we need to get young at corner. You don't need to get young. The Browns have 2 seasons, right? This season and next season, they really need to attack. That's their Super Bowl window. So guys who are at Richard Sherman's age, who might have 1 or 2 good years left, those are the guys you should attack for. And it makes sense, right? Richard Sherman played in the Joe Woods system, is familiar with Joe Woods' system, and did like playing for Joe Woods when he was in San Fran. So that all makes sense. Whether it comes to fruition, that's going to be a financial answer more than it's going to be up to Richard Sherman and the Cleveland Browns, right? That's going to be more up to what the money's going to be, what the cap's going to be, and what the situation is this offseason. And how bad does Richard Sherman want to play here, right? I mean, like, you know, all the other stuff, that's just kind of filler, right? If Richard Sherman wants to come here for the right price, I'm pretty sure the Browns would do it. This next question should come from Cleveland BCI, who says, should we drop Joe Woods? Man does his best to give away big leads. He does prevent defenses in games versus like Tennessee and Pitt, where he gave up more than 9 points. More than 9 points of the 0-16 Browns. Okay, man. Okay, look, I don't think people are coming from bad faith when they say that, right? The 0-16 Browns gave up more points. And when you say that on the surface, it does sound shocking. But understand, there was a point explosion in the NFL this year. You had guys, multiple guys doing things that had never been done up until like when Patrick Mahomes entered the league in 2018, right? So there was a point explosion. That's why it's not a apples to apples comparison when you say, oh, well, the 2016 Browns gave up less points than this Browns team. There was a point explosion. A lot of the protocols for defense affected defense, right? Well, the ability to tackle, the ability to cover, the ability to communicate. All these things were compromised by the lack of practice time. This is something we know. It was across in college football. So, like, saying that just tells me that the offenses in the NFL now score more points. The Browns, quite frankly, if you're looking at them in the right context, which is the context of every other defense in 2020, was actually a middling defense. I know it sounds crazy, but that's how bad defense was league-wide. So that's one thing. 2, you can't continue to blame Joe Woods when we had regularly guys who were not supposed to make the roster starting for this team. Robert Woods, MJ Stewart. This is a defense that was predicated, and you can go back to my preseason videos, that was predicated on the depth in the secondary. And there was depth there to start the year. Everybody got hurt. Grant Delpit got hurt. Andrew Sadeo at one point got hurt. Carl Joseph was hurt all camp. Denzel Ward was hurt all year, up and down. Greedy Williams ended up not playing. You got so many depth issues that you just had subpar secondary players out there, and that affected the defense, obviously. Now, yeah, were there parts of the season where it was obvious that Joe Woods was not up to snuff and that he was a first-year defensive coordinator? Yes, but if you're looking at this fairly, right, what he did at the end of the season, also you have to give him credit for the turnovers, right? They got a ton of turnovers this year. You got to give him credit for that. But if you look at what he did at the end of the season, right, versus the Steelers, versus the Chiefs, especially considering that the Chiefs put up like almost 40 points on the Bills, who are a better unit than the Browns, you have to give him credit for that. So he made the adjustments. We'll see what he does in year 2. If he can get a healthy secondary, if he can get some better players on defense, we'll see. But he did not put together so bad of a season that he should be fired after 1 year? The next question comes from Austin Z, who says, do you think Njoku gets traded before the start of the season? Probably not. Looks like the Browns are committed to keeping Njoku here. There's one or two options for Njoku, right? Either he gets cut or he stays on the team. Nobody's going to trade for him for $5 million a year. The production, while it was up from last year, was not good enough for anybody to justify that much money for him, especially when there's going to be a cap crunch. And it's going to be up to the Browns. Do they think that's worth it? If they do, they'll keep him. If they don't, they'll cut him. But now it looks like the needle's going towards more keep him. Next question comes from Elijah Cable, who says, do we wait another season to extend Baker or play the cap space game or extend him in the offseason? Well, you can do both, right? You can extend Baker and play the cap space game. If you extended Baker this offseason, you would be playing the cap space game, by the way, right? The earlier you extend Baker Mayfield, the more cap space game you're playing. The later you do it, the worse cap situation you're going to be in. And that's with the assumption that Baker Mayfield's going to prove to be and continue to prove to be a franchise quarterback, right? If you lock him down now, you might be able to get away with like 20 million, 25 million, maybe something like that for a long-term deal. And you can put all that money in the back end when you know the cap's going to raise. Like, there's a lot of games you can play right now if you extend them, because no matter what the extension is, and there's a lot of confusion on this, it doesn't matter what the extension is. If it's a first-round pick, the extension is going to be the year they sign the extension on the rookie deal plus the fifth-year option, and then the deal starts, right? With Deshaun Watson, his contract hasn't really started yet. He's still on his rookie deal. I believe this was his fifth-year option, or next year is going to be his fifth-year option year, so he's going to be at like $20 million. Same thing with Patrick Mahomes, right? Their big deals that we read about in the media, they have not kicked in yet. Same thing with Myles Garrett, right? His big deal has not kicked in yet. So, yeah, you're playing the cat space game either way. So I would prefer if the Browns just handled this right now, just so people don't ask about it anymore, and so it's not in the way. We just get that one out of there. But, I understand they want to wait a year. The next question comes from Project X12, who says, do you think Mac Wilson has an ability to bounce back next season? Ability? Yes. The opportunity in Cleveland? No. Browns are not in the place to wait for young players to develop anymore. We got 2 seasons where the Browns are really going to have to make a push for a Super Bowl here. If you're not going to be able to step up and play in those 2 seasons, you're not going to play. There's no room for developing. We're not just putting young guys in for snaps anymore. So does he have the ability? Absolutely. He has the ability to bounce back. Will that opportunity come in Cleveland? Probably not. Next question comes from Evo B, who says, do you think that letting Higgins go will be a good move for the Browns going forward? I know Higgins and Baker have chemistry, but the Browns really could use a burner that could take the top off of defense next to Odell. I mean, Odell is that burner, but I kind of get what you're saying. I think DPJ will be a reliable target in years come. This is a weird one, right, with Rashard Higgins, because it's really going to depend on the money with him, right? If he starts to ask for like more than like $5 million a year for like more than 2-3 years, you're going to have to let him walk. I know nobody wants to hear that, but you're going to have to let him walk, because paying Jarvis 14 plus the 7, those are 2 very similar players, right? At that point, if that price gets pushed past $5 million, you'd be asking yourself to make a choice: Jarvis Landry or Rashard Higgins. And that's obviously going to go to Jarvis. No disrespect to Rashard, it's going to go to Jarvis. Baker has chemistry with Jarvis Landry too, so it's going to go to Jarvis there, right? That's the sacrifice you got to make. So if that's going to depend on price. As far as the fit there, the Higgins is kind of an awkward fit there when Odell's back, right? Because what you get out of Jarvis, you can get out of Rashard, but Jarvis is just a better version of that, even though Rashard does make plays on the outside. It does make more sense in some sets to actually have Odell and Rashard on the opposite ends of each other, because one is a burner in Odell, the other one is not in Rashard. So there's different schools of thoughts there, but the main factor with Rashard Higgins as far as he coming back is what that price tag is going to be, right? Under $5 million, I think he's good to go. He'll be here around for the next few years. Over $5 million, he's going to be gone. But I don't think the market's going to push him to that high of a number. You know what I mean? The next question comes from Elijah Cable, who says, do you see AB, and he's saying Andrew Berry, trading down from the first-round pick? He traded back several times last year. In that late-round pick, might be better to get a couple 2s for it. It depends. Look, this draft, from my preliminary looks at it, not the draft you're going to fix your defense in, right? It's a pretty terrible defensive draft. There's a couple of good players. There's Barrymore, there's Patrick Surtain, there's the guys from Alabama who I'm not completely sold on, and then there's not much else, right? It is a offense-heavy draft. You need an offensive lineman, there's a couple here. If you need some tight ends, there's some here. Wide receivers, there's a ton. There's some quarterbacks available, but they're just the defense. I would not hang my hat on finding a starter in this draft. It might so happen that you take a gamble on somebody who ends up being a starter in year one, but you should not be depending on any of these guys you draft this year to be starters. So that considered, absolutely, trade back that number one. Trade back that number one into a pick for next year if you can, if you're Andrew Berry. Or trade that number one for a player who can contribute this year on defense, right? Because I just don't think there's going to be defensive help in this draft. The next question comes from Alexander Thornton, who says, do you think if we trade Odell before the season starts that we can go wide receiver in the first round of the draft? Or should we strictly go defensively somewhere? Trading Odell this year for draft picks makes zero sense. And it goes with a lot of what I said earlier, right? This draft stinks for defense. The one thing the Browns would be, willing to make Odell expendable for is young defensive pieces that are going to be under control for the next 3-4 years on cheap prices. There's just none of that in this draft. So trading Odell before the draft to get draft picks for this draft, it makes no sense to me. One, you're not going to get the top value for Odell because you're going to be taking an injury price cut on him. Two, you will be trading for assets in a draft that does not have the assets that you need. So it just doesn't make any sense, right? If the Browns' offense stunk, yeah, this would be the year to do it. But why would you trade Odell if your offense stunk, right? But the fact that this is such an offensive-heavy draft and the defensive prospects are just so shaky in the late part of this draft. This is not like a couple of years ago where you can get a starter, right? You can get Buda Baker in the second round. This is not that kind of draft. This draft stinks defensively. So no, I'm not trading any assets for this year's draft in exchange for Odell Beckham. No. That's any trade for Odell Beckham is going to happen during the 2021 season. If it's not working between Baker and Odell early on, and it looks like a trade needs to happen, then that's when the trade will go down for Odell. Not before, though. Unless you're offering me two players under control for the next few years that are cheap for Odell Beckham, it's not happening. So with the Odell trade, I know a lot of people love to talk about the Odell trade. In my opinion, I don't think it's happening. It does not make sense to happen. There's really no good reason for it to happen. So it ain't happening. This is a conversation before the trade deadline in 2021, maybe. And that's if it doesn't work out. There's a large possibility that it could work out between Baker and Odell. And that could be a huge, kind of pipeline for the offense. But other than that, Odell, his future with the Browns, he's going to play in 2021 for this team. It's how long after that is the question, right? The next question comes from Timothy Campbell, who says, what are the Browns' most glaring needs? Speed in the secondary. A lot of that's going to come back from injury. But yeah, speed in the secondary has been an issue. Speed on defense has been an issue. Athleticism, they need to just get a little bit more athletic and versatile on the defensive side of the ball. The next question comes from Chris, who says, how should we pay Nick Chubb, or how much should we pay Nick Chubb? I feel like we need to pay him good money and try not to lowball him. I mean, look, I know people aren't going to like to hear this, but the pecking order is going to be Baker Mayfield, then Nick Chubb. If Baker Mayfield decides that he wants a big deal and the Browns play this contract situation out in a way to where they have to give Baker Mayfield a big deal because he had a big year in 2021 and they didn't give him the extension this summer, then Nick Chubb's probably going to be walking in free agency, or he's going to have to take a, a standard running back deal, which isn't, through the roof money. Now, would I be willing to pay Nick Chubb $20 million a year knowing that nobody else in the NFL does stuff like that? No, because you would be negotiating against yourself, right? $12-15 million is probably the standard for a guy like Nick Chubb. And that's what the Browns are going to have to offer. And if they're going to have the ability to offer, that's going to be all dependent on what happens with Denzel Ward and what happens with Baker Mayfield. But thank you for the question, and thank you guys for the questions. But again, guys, thank you for asking. Have a great day. Have a good night.